We are starting today Masechta Yevamos. It is very interesting that we're starting off the whole section of Noshim, of women, with Masechta Yevamos, which is all about if somebody was already married and they didn't, and he died childless, that the other brothers have an obligation to marry this person's wife, which you would think would be put later on in this order, because first you should talk about marriage and other things and ksuvas, and then talk about this. But anyway, Yevamos is first, as Tosha said in my cotton, the continuation of my cotton, where it talks about death and all that. So it talks about Yevamos. So the law of Yevamos is the kitzah that if Reuben was married to someone and Reuben passes away childless, the Torah says that the brothers have an obligation to either marry her, or if he refused to marry her, to give her a chalitza. And it starts from the oldest brother, but really any of the brothers can marry her. Once one of the brothers marry her, then divorces her, she's free, she can marry anybody she wants. But as long as she is not married, she did not do something with one of the brothers, she's forbidden to marry anybody else. And that period, while she is waiting to either be married to one of the brothers or to receive a chalitza, is called zika. She's attached to the brothers. It's but we say brothers, it is only brothers who share a common father. If it's brothers who share a common mother, not a common father, they are not included in the mitzvah of Yibum, because it says when Yeshu Achim Yachta, when the brothers sit together, we find the same thing by the Shvatim. And the Shvatim, they did not share a common mother. What they did share was a common father. So we learn from that it's only brothers on the father's side. Now this is relevant, as we'll see in the Mishnah. And we also say that all the brothers had to be alive while Reuben was married to this woman. If the brother was born after, let's say, Reuben passed away, no longer involved in the yibum of this particular wife. Now, people used to marry many more wives than one, and we'll see in the Gemara later. Rava says, really 4 should be the maximum, but you're allowed to marry more than one wife. So there's a wife, and the other wife compared to her is called the tzara of her wife. And our Mishnah is going to talk to us about an interesting law, and that is that if, let's say, Reuben is married to 2 women, and he had only one brother, Shimon, and one of his wives was Shimon's daughter. And so that wife obviously cannot marry. There's no yibum between Reuben's wife, who happens to be the daughter of Shimon, because Shimon can't live with his daughter. So then not only Shimon, obviously doesn't have to marry his daughter, but also the other woman, the tzara of his daughter, is also exempt from the mitzvah of yibum. And then we're going to learn also the tzara of the tzara, which means, let's say Reuben had 2 brothers, and Reuben was married to 2 women. One of the women was Levi's daughter, and Shimon went ahead and stepped in when Reuben died, married not Levi's daughter, but the other wife. And then Shimon dies childless. So now his own wife plus his wife from Reuben moves over to Levi. But because Shimon's wife is a tzara of a woman who is a tzara of Levi's daughter, then all 3 are patur. That's called a tzara of a tzara. Okay, that's just a little introduction to the Mishnah. Let us begin this Mishnah. Chomesh esrei noshim. There are actually 15 women, 15 different kinds of women that are not allowed to marry a man, and these women are all of them poitret to the same. If they were married to Reuven, plus another woman who was a stranger to the brothers, nevertheless, there's no mitzvah of yibum in this case. Whenever we say there's no mitzvah of yibum, there's a mitzvah of chalitza. They are free to go. And they pater their tzaras, and they also pater tzaras saying, the example I just gave you before. They exempt them totally. Min hachalitza umin hayibum at seif ha'olam. No matter how many brothers there are, it could be 100 brothers, and if the tzara of the tzara, they keep them piling up, and each one of them dies childless. The last brother now he has 99 brothers' wives. As long as one of them was a tzara of a woman who was a daughter of his 100th wife, then they're all exempt. They're the daughter of the 50th wife, then the first 50 husbands are exempt, and then anyone beyond that is a mitzvah of yibum. The Eluhain. Let's go through all the cases. Case number 1 is Bitoy, his daughter. And when we say over here his daughter, we actually mean the daughter of a woman that he forced himself upon, rather than than his natural, as we'll see. Ubas Bitoy. So we have his daughter, we have his granddaughter, Ubas Bnoi, and the granddaughter from either the son or either the daughter. So all of these are, if Reuben was married to any one of these, to a woman called Rachel, a woman called Leah, and Leah happens to be either the daughter, the granddaughter of Shimon, when Reuben dies, not only doesn't he marry Leah, he doesn't marry Rachel either, because she's the tzara of a relative. Okay, Bas Ishtay, his stepdaughter, his wife had a daughter, because it doesn't say you're not marry a woman a daughter. His wife had a daughter, and she came in and with a daughter, existing daughter, or Bas Bno, Bas Bita, or her granddaughter and grandson. It's not your daughter at all. It's your stepdaughter, your step granddaughter. Doesn't matter. If it's your wife's daughter, you're not allowed to, with granddaughter, either from her son or from her son, as well as forbidden to you. Chamaisai, the aim chamaisai, your mother-in-law and the mother of your mother-in-law. They are both forbidden to him because they're considered an error. What do you mean your mother-in-law? Your mother-in-law was married, obviously, and then her husband died. She ended up marrying your brother. And so your brother has two wives. One of them happens to be your mother-in-law. And if your brother dies childless, and he says you cannot marry your mother-in-law, neither can you marry the other woman as well. So the tzara, again, so your mother-in-law, the mother of your mother-in-law, I mean, start picturing here the ages over here that we're talking about. It says in Torah, Ervas Isha Ubita, the erva of a woman and her daughter, you shouldn't reveal her granddaughter and a grandson. And so therefore that automatically includes 3 generations there. It includes your mother-in-law and your mother-in-law's mother. And your father-in-law's mother. These are 3 generations. So again, so Rashi learns that when it says over here, daughter of the Mishnah, it's not talking about your natural daughter. That's obvious. We're talking about the daughter of a woman that you force yourself upon. Because your daughter, that from your wife, it says right in Torah, Isha Bita. If a woman and her daughter, just because it happens to be your daughter, is no less than if it's your stepdaughter. So obviously we know already that's included. But your daughter from a woman that you force yourself upon, which means there's no kedushin, there's no marriage at all, there we learn from a separate pasuk that is forbidden to you. Okay, talking about it further. Yeah, if you have a sister from your mother, this is important. So you have a brother that you share a common father. So you have the mitzvah of Yibum to the brother. So Reuben and Shimon have one father, and they both have different mothers. So Shimon's mother had a daughter, which is your half-sister, which is Shimon's half-sister, but has no relation to Reuben. And Reuben had a different mother. So if Reuben ended up marrying your half-sister, your sister from your mother's side, again, so she is also to you. So therefore, exempts her tzara. Yeah. So all these examples here are all cases where it's on the mother's side and the mitzvah of Yibum is on the father's side. So they're not related in any way to your brother, the mother's side, and they have different mothers, and therefore it's possible to have these scenarios. So either the sister of your mother or achais imay, the sister of your mother, and v'achais ishtoi, and the sister of your wife, and which your brother married. What do you call it? The eishes achiv imay, or the wife of your brother, but your brother is on your mother's side, and then her husband died. She went and married your brother on your father's side. So you have a mitzvah of Yibum, and she was allowed to marry your brother on your father's side because she was related to your brother on your mother's side. So she's totally not related to your brother on your father's side. And then obviously you have a mitzvah of Yibum, but you can't because she is your relation to you. Yeah. Because your brother's wife is forbidden to you forever. The mitzvah of Yibum overrides the Isser of your sister-in-law. But where there is no mitzvah of Yibum, then the Isser of your sister-in-law comes right back in full force. Yeah. Then, Eishes Ochiv Shaloi Haya Ba'olamai. Let's say Reuben died childless, and after Reuben died, another brother was born. Let's say there was Reuben and Shimon, and Reuben died, and then Levi was born, and Shimon then went ahead and married. Obviously, Levi couldn't marry; he was just born. Shimon went ahead and married Reuben's wife, and then Shimon died childless, then Levi cannot marry Shimon's wife that belonged to Reuben because it's still considered Reuben's wife, even when she married Shimon, full marriage, still Reuben's wife. And since Levi was not alive when Reuben passed away, so therefore there's no mitzvah of no mitzvah of Yibum, which means then the Easter of sister-in-law kicks in. Whenever we say there's no mitzvah of Yibum, that doesn't mean there's no mitzvah. You want your cat, then it's totally usher from the Torah because she's an erva to you. Now I marry your sister-in-law. Okay, so both wives are potter because of the tzara of that, and only that, and you'll get chorus because you're marrying a sister-in-law, which is forbidden. So this is interesting. The Torah came along the mitzvah of Yibum. The whole idea of mitzvah of Yibum, which the Gemara later on that Bob will talk about, is the idea of Esed Doichaloisa, because you're not allowed to live with your sister-in-law, and not only not allowed to live, it's a very severe affair. It's an issue of chorus. And yet comes along the Torah, not only says you're allowed to in certain cases, but there's a mitzvah. Dafka to live with your sister-in-law to the legacy of your brother should still continue even afterwards. Yeah. And how do we know that? Because it says Kiyeshu Achim Yachtav. That means all the brothers had to be in existence when Reuben passed away. There's a whole question more later. What happens if this kid was born after Reuben passed away, but before Shimon married her? What happens then? Okay, so more further. Sorry. The Kalasai. Later, the Gemara will talk about the order in the Mishnah because the order seems to be a bit. It doesn't really follow the way that according to severity nowadays. The Kalasai and his daughter-in-law, your son died, and your brother married your daughter-in-law, which is his niece, and now he died childless. And obviously it's your daughter-in-law, and you can't. Even though your son died, your daughter-in-law is forbidden to you forever. So therefore, not only obviously you can Shimon can marry, but also the other woman, the tzara, also is potter. Elu potter, so they're saying all of these women that we just told you about. Not only they obviously they can't marry the brother-in-law, but neither is the other wife, the tzara, the other wife is also potter. And the tzara is the same, plus the tzara of the tzara, which I told you. Reuben, if Reuben then died, and he had two wives, one of them was Shimon's daughter-in-law. So Shimon, for example, so Shimon not only doesn't marry the daughter-in-law, nor does he marry the other wife because he's a tzara. And then what happens? But Levi was able to marry them, because he's not related. And then Levi married not the daughter-in-law, but the other woman. And then Levi died. So Levi, not only you don't marry that other woman because she's the tzara of your daughter-in-law, neither do you marry the other wife of Levi, which has nothing to do with them yet. Now it's a tzara of a tzara, and it's also exempt. And when we say you're exempt, there's no yibum, so you're also exempt from chalitza, umina yibum. You're exempt from chalitza and from yibum ad seif ha'olam, forever. B'kulan, and all of these cases, im mesu. What happens if let's say your daughter-in-law or your daughter was married, Reuben and Shimon. Shimon's daughter married Reuben, was married to Reuben, right? But she died before Reuben died. She predeceased Reuben. And Reuben now is left with the other woman that's not. So for a long time, this other woman was a tzara of your daughter, but your daughter died before the whole yivum kicked in. So if, let's say, your daughter died before the yivum kicked in, or Mino, let's say your daughter was very young, and the law is as follows. So this is a puzzling law. There's a law called Miyun. Miyun is if a girl under 12, the father has the right to marry his daughter, his Dushik and she's married Mahatoida. She wants to get this, she'll leave, she has to get divorced. But if the father dies and the sister marries off the younger sister or the mother or brother, then it's only Midrabban married for her own benefit, someone to provide for her. But she has the right to walk out until she's Bas Mitzvah. It's called Miyun. The right to walk out, doesn't need to get, you can just walk out. So what happens if your daughter, now how is it possible that your daughter should be able to be Mamayan and walk out? You're alive then if it's your daughter. So the Mefoshim will explain, the Shayim explains, talking about the thing is if you marry your daughter off at the age of 9, at the age of 10 she's divorced. The moment that she's divorced, she's independent from you because you already used up your rights in her by giving her away to another person. So now she can get married if she wants to on her own volition, but she can be Mamayan until she's 12 years old because we don't believe that she is capable of really making these decisions until she's mature and she's 12 years old. So if she's a minor, I mean, she was never married to Reuben in the first place. So we're giving examples now that even though your daughter was involved with Reuben, married to Reuben, still, and there are possibilities that Shimon can marry if Reuben dies, Shimon can marry the other wife. And the point is, at the time of Reuben's death, was your daughter still related to Reuben? So either your daughter predeceased Reuben, or your daughter mine. She was divorced before Reuben died. Or it turned out to be that she was an islandess. An islandess literally means like a ram, a male ram, a woman that is not possible to conceive. She has we learn condition, certain signs that like a male, which means that her voice is very hoarse, and she's flat-chested and so on, that she was never capable. And there's like 5 opinions in the Rishonim what actually the law is if a man marries an islandess. Is it because of mekachtos? You didn't realize, if you would have known that she was not able to carry children or anything else, you would never marry in the first place, because it's not just like an ordinary woman that unfortunately can't have children. A woman was never capable because she didn't have any of the signs of a woman who's able. So then it's a mekachtos. The whole thing is a mistake, as if they were never married. Some say that she doesn't even need a divorce. Others say with Rabbanon you do need a divorce. The big argument: if you knew she was an islandess, what happens then? But the bottom line is, even though they were married, she was married to Reuben, your daughter's married to Reuben. If she's an islandess, then it's not really a marriage. So therefore, she doesn't count, and she doesn't exempt the other woman from Yevama, from Yibum. So the other wife, then in that case, is totally permitted to Shimon, even though Shimon's daughter was married to Reuben, because as we just explained, the time of Reuben's death, she was not really attached. She was not married to Reuben, and that Tzoras Amut. When we say mutter, doesn't mean mutter. Then once the mutter, then it's a mitzvah, and she's stuck. She has to marry one of the brothers, or Shimon, or receive a chalitza. But this cannot be said that the chamoisai. You cannot say this regarding chamoisai, your mother-in-law, because you already had children. You can't say the example of, let's say, of miyun, or say the example of islandess. Right? Because how could she be an islandess when she had your wife? An islandess means you can't have children, and so your mother can never be an islandess, and nor can she be a mayan because she's an adult. She had a daughter, and you married her, and how can she still be under 12 years old? Not sure why the Mishnah has to spell that out when you would think it's obvious. But you can't say these last 2 things, b'chamaisai or be'em chamaisai. You could say that she was divorced from Reuben. That you could say, but you cannot say the case of Mian or case of islandess. Shenimtzu islandess or Shemina. You can't say those 2 cases. Now, the Mishnah will spell out further. The case I might just try to say, and how do they exempt the other wife? How does it work? How you say bitter? Let's say Shimon's daughter, or let's say Shimon's daughter, or any of these arayas. We're married to Reuben. So your daughter Leah was married to Reuben, and this Leah is forbidden to Shimon for whatever reason. One of these arayas, and Reuben had another wife. Had Rachel, another wife. And then Reuben passes away. Since Leah is exempt from Yibum, obviously, because she can't marry Shimon. So to the other wife is also put. What happened now? So that's a case of tzara. What happens now? So Rachel, when the nisas la'achav hasheni, if let's say Rachel. So Leah and Rachel cannot marry. Leah cannot marry Shimon's daughter, and therefore Rachel also is exempt from marrying Shimon. But there's another brother, Levi, and Levi has no problem with marrying Leah, it's his niece, let alone Rachel was a stranger. So she went ahead and she married Lachoshe. She married Levi. Who married Levi? Not the daughter, because it's the same problem. But the other one, Rachel. Rachel went ahead and married Levi. And Levi had another woman called Rivka, and then Levi died, and he left behind 2 wives, Rivka, and then Rachel from the first of Reuben's wife. So Kishem Shetzara is Bit Reuben's wife. Once she was considered that she shouldn't marry Shimon because she was a tzara. Once Rachel was forbidden to marry Shimon because she was a tzara of Leah, Shimon's daughter. Then now, when she married Levi, then Rivka is the tzara of a tzara. So she also cannot marry Shimon. Even though we're 100 brothers, they all have the same din. Ketzad. In other words, if then Levi died, Yehuda married, then the sorrow of that, and then Yehuda died, and the next one Yisachar married, the sorrow of that, and so on. It goes on forever, ad infinitum. No matter how many brothers there are, they're all exempt. Yeah. Sorry. Ketzad Imesa Torah saying Mutaris. What if the Tzorah died? That admitted if your daughter or one of these arroyos were married to your brother, so to Reuven, let's say Shimon's daughter was married to Reuven, and Reuven had another wife, let's say Rachel, but Mesa Bita. If your daughter who was married to Reuven died, predeceased Reuven, in his Gaja, she was divorced before Reuven died. The achakach meis avid achiv, and then Reuven died. So when Reuven died at that juncture, the only woman he was married to was Rachel. That is, was no longer the tzara of your daughter because your daughter left earlier. Tzarasa muteres. Then the Rachel is allowed to marry Shimon, and once we say allowed to, it means you have to. Right? Because what we focus on is the time that Yibum begins, what's called Zika's Yibum. At that moment, when does Yibum begin? When Reuven died. And when Reuven died, your daughter was not involved with Reuven. So therefore, there's a mitzvah of Yibum. The Chol HaYechoyle Lemon. And any woman, let's say the young girl, your daughter was a young girl, she could have been Mayan, but she decided, came 12 years old, she didn't mind. The din is if you reach the age of me and you didn't, you become not married Ma'atoida. Then but so she could have been mine. She could have been mine the whole time, but she still has time to be mine, but she didn't. So right now she's married with Rabbanon. So her kedusha now is only with Rabbanon. Matayla, she's not engaged until she's married until she's over 12. She's like 11 years old and she got married at 9. And I told you that she was already married before and she was divorced. So now she is independent. So while she's living with Reuben, she is married only with Rabbanon, because she could still be memayin, so she's not a full-fledged wife. Only with the Rabbanan she consider a wife. I don't want to consider like somebody else other than a wife. So she's a wife with the Rabbanan. Then, if since she's married with the Rabbanan, so Mahataida, the Taida doesn't recognize the marriage. So Mahataida, the other wife, Rachel, it has to marry Shimon, because there's no other wife here. But the Rabbanan say, 1 second, Shimon's daughter is involved with the Reuven, with the Rabbanan at least. So, so therefore, obviously, she has no, she can't marry for Shimon. But the other wife, since Mahatoida, she could marry Shimon. With Rabbanon, she is the tzara of Shimon's daughter. So therefore, we don't allow her to marry Shimon, but she has to get a chalitza because Mahatoida, she's still connected. She's a zika to Shimon. Therefore, she has to get a chalitza. She gets chalitza and she doesn't get yibum. Okay, I hope that was pretty straightforward. I know I looked at some diagrams yesterday and they just confused me, the diagrams. But maybe some of you, when you see the diagram, makes it easier to understand. So there are all these forms now given out with diagrams of all these family permutations. And later on, in not so long from now, in about 2 weeks, we'll find is a mission there that's quite complicated, many different permutations. There we might need a chart to delineate all the different permutations. Anyhow, that's the Gemara. Right now, the Gemara focuses on the sequence of the mission. Mechdi, Kulu, Machais, Isha, Yalfinen. How do we know all the laws of our Arayis that are exempt from Yibum? We learn them all out from the sister of a wife. The Gemara will later learn out from the sister of your wife, and there's no Yibum there. So we learn now that everyone else also, all our Arayis are exempt from Yibum. You might think that there's a mitzvah, just like your sister-in-law generally is forbidden to you, and yet it comes along Yibum and kicks in and says, but normally it's forbidden to you, get chorus, but here there's a mitzvah, the brother died, you should take over. Now you could have thought also that even Arayis, which is an Avera, but the mitzvah of Yibum overrides that. So we have a pasuk that tells you it doesn't, and we learn that from the Achais Isha, from your wife's sister. So L'chaydev, that's the source of all of this, of all these Arayis. There's no mitzvah of Yibum. Listna Achais Isha B'Reisha shouldn't have been the first case in our Mishnah. The mother of all cases. If you can tell me, no, the Mishnah's order is different. There are different punishments for Arayis. A couple of them, like your daughter and whatever, there's a couple of them, your mother-in-law, there's Sreifa. You get burnt for it. A couple of them, you get skila, get stoned. And the vast majority of them, you get karas. So, and we in Gemara Sanhedrin, we learn which is the worst punishment. We accept the Chachamim that skila is by far the worst, followed by Sreifa. However, Rab Shimon says that Sreifa is the worst. So maybe the author of our Mishnah is Rab Shimon, and he believes Sreifa is the worst, and that's why he starts talking about the Arayas, which involves Sreifa, moves on to skila, then he moves on to Karis. Maybe that's the order of our Mishnah. If you can tell me, the order of our Mishnah depends on severity. But Rab Shimon, he follows the view of Rab Shimon, we say that Sreifa is considered the strictest, and therefore it talks about your daughter and your granddaughter and your mother-in-law and your mother-in-law's mother or your father-in-law's mother, because all of those you get Sreifa for. If so, listen, then it should have first mentioned your mother-in-law, because it says in the pasuk, if you take a woman and her mother, it says zimi, and you should get burnt. So the mother-in-law should have been first. The if you take a woman, which you're allowed to, and then you take her mother, which is your mother-in-law, that's when you get sreifa. So if the idea of the Mishnah is to talk about the severity of different punishments, then first bring out the most, where the Torah clearly spells out the punishment, and then bring out all the other permutations that have to share the same punishment. That's question number one. But furthermore, if so, why is the last case in our Mishnah here daughter-in-law? Then the case after your mother-in-law should have been your daughter-in-law, because daughter-in-law you get skila for. The basa sreifa skila chamura. Even according to Shimon, skila is high up on the charts. First is sreifa, then skila. So why does the Mishnah relegate kalasa to the very last of the 15 cases? It should have been brought down right after you finished examples of sreifa. Bring down skila. Ella, you know why the Mishnah starts off with your daughter? It's rather than your wife's sister, which is the source of all these that are rois apart from Yibum. Ella bita, you know why we wrote down your own daughter, which is quite extraordinary. Kivan the asya midrasha chaviva. We don't. The Torah, nowhere does the Torah talk about your daughter. When the Torah says daughter and a granddaughter, is talking about a woman that you force yourself on. It says nowhere does it say in the Torah your daughter. So it says Isha, it says in the Torah Isha Bita, which means your stepdaughter. And we say Isha Bita also includes your daughter. So because it's not clear in the Torah, the Tana of Mishnah likes to talk about something which is not clear in the Torah, because he said you're going for drasha chavivala. He enjoyed it. Says what if so? So it's not only your daughter. Kula nami midrasha asu. Every single case in the Mishnah, except the wife's sister, how do you know that there's no mitzvah of yibum? It's from a drasha. So every case is a drasha. So one answers, you're right. Every case is a drasha. But what's a drasha? The difference is the other 14 cases in the Mishnah that's a drasha is regarding the mitzvah of yibum. That how do you know that there's no mitzvah of yibum? Because it's additional avera. Besides being your sister-in-law, these additional arayas. So that's all drasha true. But bitay, the whole idea of bitay is a drasha. You're right. You got to give what's called a drasha. The iser of living in these other arayas was clearly in the Torah. But bitay, where does the Torah say you now live with your daughter? Bitay ikir isur midrasha. The whole iser is midrasha. What do you mean? As the Gemara explains. Amar Rav Rava says, "You told me." Tracy has a little problem here. How can you say that Yishchak was Rav's teacher? So how can it be that Rava heard something from Rav? He said, Omar Li. That means they met each other. How's that possible? So Tracy is quite extraordinary. He says that maybe he's supposed to say, what do you call it? What is it? I'm sorry. Okay, so Taisa says here. Taisa says starts off. Taisa includes the two Yishchak of Dimit, but Taisa starts off saying maybe instead of saying that Rav Yishchak of Dimit told me, say that Rav told me. Now that's pretty extraordinary as well, because Rav was the first generation of Amoraim and Rava was the fifth. How did Rava speak to Rav? You have a problem with Rav Yishchak of Dimit, who was Rav's teacher, but Rav himself was also a problem. Rava was born the day Rav Yehuda passed away. Rav Yehuda was the student of Rav. And remember, Rav passed away, so Rav Yehuda went to Shmuel. So how can Teresa say here that the Rava learned directly from Rav? Very difficult. Anyway, so what did he say? When we said Asya, we learn out a pasuk. We had this a few times already. Heina, Asya, Zima. It says in the pasuk that there's two psukim has the word zim in it. It talks about sreifa. It says in the pasuk that the erva of a woman and a daughter you shouldn't reveal, her grandson, her granddaughter, whether through your son, through her son, through her daughter, don't take. It says shahada heina, they're your relative. Zimahi, it's zima. When it comes to burning a fire, it says you shouldn't take a woman and a mother and zimahi, and you should burn them. So by H it says zima, and by the erva of ish and a daughter it says zima, and so therefore we know that the zima describes the punishment. But how you know that your daughter is usher? Because before it says the erva of your granddaughter and every grandson you shouldn't reveal because ervas chahena. Now you would think a kabbalah, if your granddaughter is forbidden to you, of course you know your daughter's daughter or your son's daughter, but your daughter's daughter is forbidden. Sure, your daughter is forbidden to you as well, but nevertheless you cannot punish from a kabbalah. So therefore we say, so your daughter we know. When it says Isha ubita, a woman and her daughter, doesn't matter her daughter, just because your daughter doesn't make any less your wife's daughter. So obviously we know that your daughter is forbidden. But what about your daughter from a woman that you force yourself upon? How do you know that's forbidden? So it says, the pasuk says, "Ervas bas bincha bas bitcha." Doesn't say how it became your granddaughter. So this pasuk here is talking about any granddaughter, and doesn't mention the word isha, your wife, because a woman that you force yourself upon is not your wife. But it just, when it says over here your granddaughter, doesn't say if it's the granddaughter of who, of the wife or the woman that you force yourself upon. So so therefore we know the first pasuk is talking about Eres bas bincha bas bitcha, is talking about a woman you force yourself upon. There's no ishas, but it's forbidden. But all we know is your granddaughter. How do you know as well that your daughter is forbidden to you? So we learn from Xer Shabbat. Why? It says here, ki ervoscha heina, and the other pasuk where it says heina, it says a woman, isha ubita. It says there a woman, and that woman is your wife. It says, right? Isha ubita, a woman and your daughter. And it says shara heina, it's your relative. So therefore, we know they were talking about Xer Shabbat heina, that just like a woman you force yourself upon, so to over here, your wife, and it says bita, the daughter. That's how we know your daughter is asa. And then when it says zima, we learn the kind of punishment it is straight. So the whole idea of your daughter being asa is only, and that you get straight, is only from a Xer Shabbat. And that's why, so it's a drasha. And that's why the Mishnah picks it first. Now you tell me the whole word is because anything we learn from drasha you really enjoy. So let me just quickly ask you, so then the only din that's clearly written in the Torah regarding Yibum, that don't marry her, even though she's a mitzvah Yibum, and that is your wife's sister. So that should be the last case, because everything else is a drasha we learn from there, and that should be the last case. So the Gemara says, no, the way the Mishnah works is, once I was talking to you about the Isa of a sister, it mentions also the sister of your wife, because it's the same idea. It's horizontal, it's your sister. Says the Gemara, so listen, so learn the whole Isa of sisters also at the very end. Talk about your daughter-in-law first, like we thought before because of Skila, and then mention sisters and throw in your sister of your wife, the last thing, in order that the sister of your wife should be the last thing in the Mishnah, because that's the only thing that's not a drasha. Elegant answers, Tana kurvi nakit, talks about the degree of relations, those that are related to you closer and those a bit further. Tana bita talks about your daughter, ubas bita, and then the next thing is your granddaughter, bas b'nai, your granddaughter of your son. The kreve atmit, they're your biological relatives. But I did a ton of shloisha lamata. Once he talks 3 generations down, then he talks about her 3 generations. Her daughter and granddaughter. But I did a ton of shloisha lamata. He talks about her daughters. No, but even though they're not related to you, the woman brought a woman, your stepdaughter, but it's the same idea. So we mentioned that. Then you go 3 generations above, mother-in-law, your mother-in-law, mother. Then you mention. So that's all vertical. Then you mention achoisoi, then you mention sisters. So your sister, the mother's sister. Why? The kreva atzva. These are biological relatives. The idea bisa acha. I want to talk about relations of sisterhood, Tana Achais Ishtay. Then you mentioned your wife's sister because we're my sisters. But and rightfully so. So why is the daughter left last? The case before that, which is the brother who wasn't around then, that has no relation at all. That should have been last. You're right. The daughter should mention the Lama Shum Kurvu is not a relation at all. Your brother wasn't born yet when Reuben died. That's not a relation. That's the Idim Isa Achva, because we're talking about brotherhood. Tana H Achiv Shalahaya Balami talks about the brother who wasn't born yet. Still talking about brotherhood. And then Bahadu Tana Kalasa, which is totally out of left field, of daughter-in-law. Okay, we'll stop over here. I hope it was all right for the first day.